political advertising never made any sense. Why pay for ads when you can just pay people directly to vote for you? It's brilliant. Cut out the middleman. Why didn't I think of that? I mean, granted, it does seem like buying votes should be illegal. Yeah, well, it turns out that it is. It is very illegal. But nonetheless, Elon Musk is making it rain for Donald Trump. First, he gave the campaign $75 million through a new PAC, but that just wasn't enough. Musk has recently announced some, shall we say, incentives to get people to vote for Trump in swing states. And Musk has announced that every day between now and Election Day, he will give $1 million to a registered voter chosen at random who signed one of his petitions.
We're going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
Doesn't that sound a little bit like a, I don't know, bribe? Well, today we're going to talk about whether Musk's actions constitute a criminal offense, the sentence that he could face if convicted, and whether federal law enforcement will intervene before the election. Because in his seemingly endless quest to be a poorly written James Bond villain, Elon Musk has inserted himself into the 2024 presidential election in a big way. He took the @America Twitter handle away from its user and gave it to himself. He spent $75 million to launch an organization called the America PAC to support Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and he appeared at a Trump rally where he jumped up and down like a teenager at a Chapel Roan concert.
Is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space. Come here. Take over, Elon, just take over.
And now Elon has temporarily moved to Pennsylvania and declared in a very sincere way that he's a fan of both the Steelers and the Eagles, making him exactly one of one. But Musk's America PAC is running Trump's Get Out the Vote campaign. And one of the key initiatives is incentivizing people to sign a petition pledging their, quote, support for the First and Second Amendments by offering cash rewards exclusively to residents of swing states. The petition states, quote, the First and Second Amendments guarantee freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. By signing below, I am pledging my support for the First and Second Amendments. Now, usually a petition is meant to demonstrate public support for some proposition, like the right to bear arms, but this petition seems to have very little value in demonstrating anything. And as a group of Republican attorneys and public officials have observed, quote, critically, America PAC has not made the names or numbers of petition signers public, so the petition provides no demonstration of public support for even that statement. But the rewards include $47 for each registered voter in a swing state that a petitioner recruits to sign, or $100 if the voter is from Pennsylvania. And in his tweet announcing the offer, Musk proclaimed it was easy money. And a few days later, he upped the ante. Musk awarded a random Pennsylvania petition signer a $1 million prize on October 19th, 20th, and 21st. And he says he's going to be giving random $1 million prizes to other people who are registered to vote in any of the 7 swing states from now through Election Day, November 5th. Now, the cash offers in Pennsylvania are only available for petition signatures submitted by October 21st because that's the voter registration deadline in the Commonwealth. And since only registered voters can claim the prizes, the offer basically incentivizes people to register by offering $100 and maybe even more just for registering to vote and filling out an online petition. This creates a financial motive for people to register before the deadline. And the obvious question here is whether this scheme violates any election laws. Is Elon doing anything illegal? And the answer is yeah, it's probably illegal vote buying. Now, America has a long history of giving people freebies in exchange for votes. In our video on things that used to be illegal, we talked about how the Founding Fathers used to give voters free drinks. In fact, 24-year-old George Washington failed to win a seat in the Virginia House of Burgesses after he decided against treating voters to booze. 3 years later, Washington ran again, and this time he showed up with 144 gallons of alcoholic drinks.
Let's do this.
And it was a success. He paid a half gallon of liquor or wine for every vote that he won. Now, eventually Americans decided it was wrong to buy votes, especially with alcohol. I mean, sure, money is speech, but it's not that speech. And it should be obvious, but the practice undermines the integrity of elections by coercing or incentivizing voters to cast their ballots for specific candidates or party rather than voting based on their real preferences. And vote buying is the practice of offering money, goods, or services to people in exchange for their vote in an election. And in the United States, several federal laws address giving something of value in exchange for voting or registering to vote. 18 U.S.C. 597 makes it a federal crime to pay, offer, or promise any money or benefit in exchange for voting or withholding a vote for a specific candidate in a federal election. And there's also 52 U.S.C. 10307, which states, quote, whoever knowingly or willfully gives false information as to his name, address, or period of residence in the voting district for the purpose of establishing his eligibility to register or vote, or conspires with another individual for the purpose of encouraging his false registration to vote or illegal voting, or pays or offers to pay or accepts payment either for registration to vote or for voting, shall be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned not more more than 5 years or both. So, as you can see, this section of the Voting Rights Act makes it illegal for any person to pay or offer to pay anyone for voting or registering to vote. And according to the Department of Justice, this kind of scheme doesn't need to be successful to be illegal. Quote, Section 10307C applies as long as a pattern of vote buying exposes a federal election to potential corruption, even though it cannot be shown that the threat materialized. This means we don't have to wait for the election to figure out if Musk's actions swayed voters before deeming it illegal. And the DOJ says that, quote, the statute rests on the premise that potential voters can choose not to vote, that those who choose to vote have a right not to have the voting process diluted with ballots that have been procured through bribery, and that the selection of the nation's leaders should not degenerate into a spending contest, with the victor being the candidate who can pay the most voters. But most vote buying is not as simple as giving cash for votes, although that has happened before. For example, in 1996, the candidate running for sheriff and commissioner of Dodge County, Georgia, engaged in so much open vote buying that the magistrate called the atmosphere, quote, a successful flea market. The open bidding for votes was like an auction where both sides, quote, paid the voter $20 to $40 after the voter cast his or her absentee ballot. Sometimes the cash payment occurred in the courthouse bathroom. But Musk's scheme is slightly less crass. Now, the courts interpret 10307C to include almost anything of value. For example, in U.S. versus Garcia, the Duval County welfare director was accused of a vote-buying scheme. She was responsible for issuing vouchers for food, clothing, prescriptions, and medical services to indigent persons in need of welfare assistance. And the government charged Garcia and 3 other people with giving welfare food vouchers to people in return for their promises to vote absentee for a certain local candidate in the Democratic primary election. And the 11th Circuit upheld their convictions and found that the term payment was broad enough to include any other item of value, such as welfare benefits. Now, whether the item is something of value depends on, quote, the perspective of the voter receiving the item and not the person offering it. And not everything of value violates the law. Quote, free rides to the polls or providing employees paid leave while they vote are not prohibited. But what's the difference between a payment or welfare voucher and a ride? Well, the ride makes it easier to get to the polls, but it doesn't influence the individuals who have already decided to vote to actually cast their ballots. And this statute doesn't require proof that a voter was paid to support a specific candidate. Offering something of value to get someone to vote or register to vote falls under its scope. For example, in 2008, Ben & Jerry's initially offered free ice cream on Election Day to anyone wearing an I voted sticker, but later adjusted the promotion to allow any sticker due to concerns about Section 10307C. As the company now acknowledges, quote, it turns out that giving away freebies as incentives for voting is not super legal, so we had to modify the offer. Free scoops for anyone who had a sticker on, voting related or otherwise. Bunch of freaking killjoys. Now, obviously, if you're legally buying votes, you'll want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've gotten in a car crash, suffered a data breach, especially if you've got one of those data breach letters saying the information might have been leaked, or dealing with a workers' comp or social security issue, we can represent you or help find you the right attorney. Because it's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can get the best representation and find out what your options are. So just click on the link in the description or call the phone number on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team, so click below. But the DOJ manual specifically references lottery chances as something of value. We checked and it doesn't seem like there's case law specifically on point about lotteries as vote bribing schemes, but the DOJ's interpretation carries significant weight. Now, to figure out whether any of Musk's activities are illegal, we have to look at each offer. And Elon's first gambit was offering voters in Pennsylvania the opportunity to see him give a speech as long as they signed the petition and already voted in the election. Now, this seems like a pretty clear offer of payment, which again means anything of value for voting. And it seems like this would violate Section 597 in the same way that the Ben & Jerry's offer did. But the first monetary offer was to pay registered voters $47 if they got another person to sign a petition. Now, the statute doesn't bar someone from paying others to do campaign work. And in another case that involved the Garcia welfare vote buying scheme, some of the defendants argued that they were paid cash to do campaign work, like handing out posters. But the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld several convictions, saying the jury had enough evidence that people were actually given $30 to vote, not to do other activities for the candidates. And Elon's PAC is hiring people. If you click on the Ad America PAC Twitter page, you can apply for canvassing jobs in swing states, and that's perfectly legal. However, the statute specifically prohibits payments, quote, for registration to vote. And the Justice Department says that Section 10307C does not apply to payments made to signature gatherers for voter registration such individuals may obtain. However, such payments become actionable under Section 10307C if they are shared with the person being registered. Now, to appear on a ballot, candidates often need to collect a certain number of signatures from registered voters. And when someone approaches you at Target and asks you to add your signature, that's totally legal, even if that person is being paid to do the work. but it becomes illegal if they pay you for signing your name. And while Musk could argue that the $47 payments are for campaign work, that interpretation is pretty weak because of the voter registration requirement. Restricting the payments to registered swing state voters suggests the intent was to pay people to register, and it really had nothing at all to do with the petition. Although those who signed the petition certainly gave Musk valuable data for a big mailing list. And later he raised the amount to $100 specifically for Pennsylvania voters. That runs into the same problem as the $47. The petition supporting the First and Second Amendments is meaningless. But it's pretty obvious why they did this. Someone who supports the Second Amendment so much they're willing to sign a petition of support for it is probably going to vote for Donald Trump. So they're clearly counting on the selection bias here. And the money is being provided specifically for registered voters who reach out to other registered voters. And election law expert and UCLA law professor Rick Hasson, who's usually a very sober voice on election law, says, quote, "Though some of the other things Musk was doing were of murky legality, this one is clearly illegal." But wait, there's more. You might recall that Elon also offered a lottery. Quote, "All you need to do is sign the @America petition in support of constitutional rights to free speech and bear arms to have a daily chance of winning $1 million. You can be from any or no political party, and you don't even have to vote." Now, we recently talked about the legality of some of Mr. Beast's old lotteries. Lotteries are distinct from sweepstakes, which are legal. Sweepstakes are games where a person is chosen randomly to win a prize, and sweepstakes participants do not need to give consideration to enter. And a raffle is, quote, "an activity in which people buy tickets with different numbers, some of which are later chosen to win prizes, that's organized in order to make money for a good social purpose." And in fact, Kamala Harris is actually holding a sweepstakes right now. Quote, "We're inviting one lucky supporter and a friend to our Get Out the Vote concert." And although you can donate to enter the sweepstakes, you don't have to pay anything at all. If you click on the link and enter your email, you can enter without contributing. But Elon's offer, on the other hand, is clearly an illegal lottery. A lottery becomes illegal if it involves three key elements: 1, consideration; 2, chance; and 3, a prize. Now, consideration refers to a payment or something of value given to enter the lottery. Chance means the outcome is based on luck rather than skill, and a prize is a reward given to the winner. And if all three elements are present, the lottery is generally illegal unless it's specifically authorized by state law, such as a state-run lottery. And the DOJ says that a lottery should be considered a thing of monetary value that constitutes vote buying in violation of Section 10307C. And it looks like it also violates state law as well. Musk's $1 million lottery also violates 18 Pennsylvania Crimes and Offenses Code, Section 5512, which defines and prohibits illegal lotteries in Pennsylvania. In fact, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro called the scheme concerning and said law enforcement should look at it.
So you think it might not be legal, yes or no?
I think it's something that law enforcement can take a look at. I'm not the Attorney General anymore of Pennsylvania, I'm the governor, but it does raise some serious questions.
And that's probably because in Pennsylvania, vote buying is also prohibited by state law under 25 Pennsylvania Statute Section 3539, which specifically addresses bribery in elections. And it says, quote, "Any person who shall directly or indirectly give or promise to offer to give any gift or reward in money, goods, or other valuable thing to any person with intent to induce him to vote or refrain from voting for any particular candidate or candidates, or who shall directly or indirectly procure for or offer or promise to procure for such person any such gift or reward with the intent aforesaid, shall be sentenced to pay a fine not exceeding $15,000 or to undergo an imprisonment of not more than 7 years or both in the discretion of the court." Now that law has a pretty broad definition of what something of value is: a gift or offer to give money, goods, or other valuable things. It also prohibits voters from accepting such offers. That means a person who accepts payments from Musk could be prosecuted for violating the state and federal laws. And that's exactly what happened in the companion case to Garcia. The people who accepted the $30 cash payments and the welfare vouchers were actually prosecuted for participating in the scheme. So if you're one of Elon's $1 million winners, beware. Now, Musk can argue that a lot of the petition signers were already registered. He stated that the lottery is just about the petition. Quote, "You don't have to vote, just sign a petition saying you support the Constitution." Now, that's probably his best defense, saying it was more about harvesting email and contact information for these people than it was about actually getting people to vote. But the lottery isn't restricted to people who are already registered. You can sign the petition, but you're not entered to win $1 million unless you register by the deadline in swing states. And the goal is to get more people registered. And in some ways, this is uncharted water. There isn't a case directly on point that deals with this sort of indirect but clearly intended to be directly related to registration or voting kind of case. And it could be a strong counter-argument that neither Musk's payments or the lottery are payments to directly register to vote. If we treat Musk's words credulously, then all he's doing is giving people a little cash to sign a petition supporting the Constitution and probably building a donor list. And that's definitely legal. But if Musk took the information about the voters who signed the petition, then offered them something of value to vote for Trump, that would probably be illegal, but he would obviously argue that's not what happened here. So for a court to conclude that Musk violated these state or federal statutes, The court would have to say that the monetary incentive is not about the petition, that the petition was just a ruse for the real plan, which was to give people cash payments and a shot at $1 million to induce people to register to vote. And that indirectness definitely makes it a less clear case of campaign fraud, and possibly an edge case. But as we've discussed, there's evidence against this interpretation as well. The government could say that Musk only created the payments for voters who registered, and the program was announced right before the registration deadlines, so we can infer that he was paying people to register. But on the other side, Musk would simply say it's too indirect to violate the law. He didn't pay them to register to vote. He paid people to sign a petition, and the only ones he paid happened to be registered voters. So there's no way the payment could induce registration, let alone voting. And then making things even more surreal, Cards Against Humanity, which is suing Musk over Tesla destroying its land, made a similar offer in response to Musk. The company's offering $100 to people who did not vote in 2020, but will vote in 2024. They announced this on Twitter of all places. They said, quote, "Stop masturbating and listen up, America. If you didn't vote in 2020, Cards Against Humanity will pay you to apologize, making a voting plan, and publicly post hashtag Donald Trump is a human toilet, up to $100 if you live in a swing state and lean blue." And they're asking people in swing states to check their voter registration and make a plan to vote. And that seems to be similar, if more parodical version of what Musk is doing. And they can also make the same arguments. They aren't paying someone to vote or to register. They're just asking people to make plans to vote. They say, quote, "It's a crazy legal loophole that we can just start a super PAC, buy the personal voting records of every American on the internet, and then pay blue-leaning non-voters to apologize and make a voting plan. This whole thing should probably be illegal." Well, Cards Against Humanity, maybe it is. So if convicted, Musk faces up to 5 years in prison for the federal offense alone. But as Spencer the Scowlow has explained, the amount of time a person gets for violating federal law depends on federal sentencing guidelines. And under those guidelines, paying people to register or vote carries a base offense level of 12. And soliciting or accepting payment has a base level offense of 6, but offering or making payments, as Musk did, increases the base offense level to 12. And Musk could also face a 4-level increase because he was an organizer or leader of a criminal activity involving 5 or more participants. So if he was convicted at trial, he'd likely face sentencing based on an offense level of 16 or 14 if he pled guilty. So maybe a sentence of 2 years. But the question is whether the DOJ or the state prosecutors in Pennsylvania will act on this. The Department of Justice is unlikely to do anything about this until after the election. The DOJ has a policy which discourages federal prosecutors from taking overt investigative or prosecutorial actions related to candidates or elections within 60 days of a general election. The goal of that policy is to avoid influencing or appearing to influence the outcome of an election. But this policy is not a formal rule or law, but rather a practice based on DOJ traditions and internal memoranda, such as the 2012 memo issued by then Attorney General Eric Holder. The 60-day window is meant to prevent any political impact on public opinion, where news of an investigation could unfairly sway voters. But this policy isn't absolute. The DOJ retains discretion to take action if a situation is deemed critical or urgent enough to warrant it, regardless of the timing. And a group of Republicans who served in government wrote a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland urging him to act. They write that, quote, "We are aware of nothing like this in modern political history. Law enforcement agencies are appropriately reluctant to take actions shortly before elections that could affect how people vote, but serious questions arising under laws that directly regulate the voting process must be an exception. Otherwise, individuals may act with impunity, with consequences, if any, coming only long after the damage is already done." Now, if Musk does end up going to jail, he'll probably want a really good meal, especially if it help him slim down because he's been looking a little portly lately. And he'd probably love today's sponsor, Factor, because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And the meals are completely ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You can eliminate the hours it would take to shop, meal prep, and cook, so you can spend your day doing the things that you actually want to do. You can eat stress-free this fall and never get bored with what you're eating. You can choose from over 35 different options a week, including ones that are keto, calorie smart, vegan, and veggie, and more. And on top of that, Factor offers a ton of snack options for when you don't need a full meal. And Factor meals are fresh and never frozen, so you know you're getting a high-quality meal. Factor meals arrive at your door pre-prepared and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. In the same amount of time I could even think about going to the grocery store, my Factor meal is already done. And thank goodness, because I was getting hungry. Because sometimes I just want a good, healthy meal without having to cook, and it's a perfect workday dinner. And it's surprisingly affordable, way less expensive than takeout or those pricey delivery apps, plus it tastes way better. And Factor also offers Gourmet Plus meals as part of your weekly options, so you can try meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and truffle butter and asparagus. But honestly, you can't go wrong with their normal offerings either. Factor's team of gourmet chefs creates each meal to help you feel your best all day long, and they really are extremely delicious. Plus, Factor's super flexible. You can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. So if this is making you as hungry as I am, you can click on the link below or the one that's on screen and use the code LegalEagle50 to get 50% off your first factor box and then 20% off your next 4 orders. Again, just click on the link below and use the code LegalEagle50 for 50% off your first factor box and then 20% off your next 4 orders. And after that, click on this box over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.